Okay, in this tutorial, we're going to go into a bit on how to read from the console. So up to this point, we've been displaying a lot of things to the console. We've displayed strings, we've displayed numbers, we've displayed various elements to the console, but we never read something in from the console, which is what you normally want to do, right? You want to write a program that's going to ask the user some questions. After they answer those questions, you're going to do something with that information, and then you're going to give them some values or some answer out. So let's learn how to read from the console. There's a couple components that we need when we read from the console. We're going to be using another class to read from the console. Just like we're creating a class for our Hello World, or I'm still calling this Hello World, we're going to use another class that was written that allows you to read from the console and also allows you to read from files and things like that we'll do later. And when we're going to use somebody else's class, we need to tell the compiler that we're using it. And the way we do that is we use an import statement, and we put it up above the class. An import is a keyword, and it takes one argument, and it takes the name of the class that you're importing, right? So we'll import java.util.scanner. It is probably one of the most commonly used classes with a set of methods in it to read from the console. So that's the first step. If we forget to do this when we go to use a method to read from the console, it's going to say, hey, I don't know what that method is until you import that class into your code. Okay, so now there's two things we need to do. We first need to declare a variable of type scanner. And the variable name, the type is scanner, just like I declared a variable int, right? When I declared a variable int, I said int x, right? The same is true when I declare a variable of scanner. I say scanner, and I could call it x, but I'm going to call it something that relates to reading from the console or input, right? So I'm going to call my scanner in, right? And then what we need to do is we say equals new scanner, and we tell it that we're reading from the console. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky to learn Java at the beginning, because you're using things that you didn't learn yet. And what you're using here is you're actually using object-oriented programming and instantiation, and you're not going to learn that for another few weeks at best. So for now, let's just have a cursory understanding of what this line does. This line declares a variable in that is of type scanner, just like I declared an integer x, which is a variable x of type int. This is a variable in of type scanner. And this right-hand side, the only part I want you to understand for now is this system.in in parentheses there means I'm going to be reading from the console. If we were going to be reading from a file, we would put something else there. If we were going to be reading from some other device, we'd put something else there. So for now, I want you to kind of ignore the new scanner, because that gets into object-oriented and instantiation. So for now, we're declaring a variable in of type scanner, and we're saying that it comes from the console. The input is going to come from the console. Now, once I have that variable declared, I can use it. No. So let's see how to use it. Now, first, let's say I was going to ask the user to enter a number, right? I could use system.out.println. Please enter a number, right? Or let's ask them to enter their name. Please enter your name, right? Your name. Okay, so if I run this code now, it would run perfectly. The only thing it's going to do is print, please enter your name. And that's not a bad idea to try every once in a while. And we run it and it says, please enter your name, and the program ends, right? Okay, so it did exactly what it's supposed to do. So now we have to tell the program to sit there and wait until the user types their name in. Now, a couple things. When the user types their name, or if we ask them to enter a number and they typed a number, we need to be able to store that name or that number somewhere. And the way we do that is we declare a variable. So I'm going to declare a variable of type string for their name. Okay, so now I have a variable that's ready to hold the name that they type in. Now, we're going to assign to name, right, whatever's on the right-hand side of this line. And what we're going to do on the right-hand side of that line is we're going to use a method that we can now use because we have this variable called in. So I'm going to put in dot next line. Now, next line is a method that stops your program, waits for the user to type a string, or actually a whole line, waits for them to hit carriage return, and once they hit the enter or the carriage return, it takes whatever they typed in and it's going to put it into this variable called name, right? Now, maybe then I want to check and I'm going to tell them what they typed in. So I'm going to put system.out.println your name is, and then I'm going to say, I'm going to append whatever they typed in. So again, this program's pretty silly. I'm asking them to type their name and then I'm telling them what their name is. Not a useful program, but it's very useful in showing you how to do input from the console. So let's run this program now. So I run the program and I come down here and it says, please enter your name, and I'll type my name, Professor Kula. And when I hit enter or return, it's going to get to this line and it's going to say your name is Professor Kula, whatever I typed in there, right? So if I run it again, right, and I type, ABC, it's going to say your name is ABC. All it's doing is putting out what they typed in. Now, there are various different methods like next line. Next line is useful when you're reading a string in from the user, right? Very useful. When we're reading numbers in, then we're going to use a different method, because if I read a number in, I might want to be able to add or subtract that number. Now, there's nothing that's stopping me from typing a number in here, but that number that I typed in is a string. I can't really add to it. I can't say name plus 1 in a sense and get 124. I can only do that if I have an integer. So let's see how we would read in an integer. Let's declare an integer, num, and let's ask the user to type in a number. Print line, enter a number. Okay, and now we'll say assign to num in.next int. Now, next int, as it clearly looks, is going to allow the user to type in an integer. Once they do and hit enter, it's going to take that integer value and put it into num. So I could print that out, right? I could tell them the number you entered is print line, the number you entered is plus num. Okay, so now let's run our program. Click compile and run. Please enter your name, Professor Kula. Enter a number. I'm going to type 25, and the number you entered is 25. And I have that value stored in num. So let's change this a little bit and declare two numbers, num1 and num2, right? So now I have to change this to num1, right? Num1. Okay. So now let's ask them to enter a second number, right? So I'm going to do that right after they enter the first number. So I'm going to take this line of code, these two, and I'm just going to paste it right here. So enter another number, right? And this time I'm going to read that number into num2. So now I have one of their numbers in num1, one of them in num2, right? And now I can say the numbers you entered are, right? And I could put plus num1, and then I could put, I want to put like a comma and a space, and then I could put num2. And now when I run this, it's going to ask me to enter two numbers, and it's going to display the two numbers they have. Now, this code, I don't really want to run this every time. But instead of deleting it, what I'm going to do, I can put above it, right? I can kind of comment that from there to, whoops, there out with a block comment. So now it's treating these as commented lines, right? It's not going to run them. It's just going to ignore them. Just like I did up top here, it's going to ignore this code. So now I'm only going to deal with these numbers, right? So it's going to ask me to enter a number, enter another number, and then it's going to print them out. So enter a number, 10, enter another number, 25. The numbers you entered are 10, 25. Now let's say I wanted to do something with those numbers, like add them up, right? I could declare another variable called sum, and I could say system.out.println the sum of your numbers is plus sum, right? And now all I have to do is add them, right? So sum equals num1 plus num2. And what's this going to do? It's going to ask me for two numbers. It's going to add them up. It's going to take the two numbers, add them, and put the value in sum, and then I'm going to display the sum. So let's run this code, right? Enter a number, 10. Enter another number, 25. The numbers you entered are 10 and 25. The sum of your numbers is 35. Now, you can do this two ways. You can actually add the numbers right in the print line. And some people do that. They say, why should I declare a variable and when I don't need to? In my opinion, it's better practice to not do calculations in the actual print line. So for instance, let's say I didn't want to declare sum and use it in the print line. I could have just done this, system.out.println the sum of your numbers is, and I could just put num1 plus num2, right? And it's going to add those two numbers and it's going to print them out. So now I'm going to get it twice. I'm going to get it here and I'm going to get it here, right? So let's run this code. Enter a number, 10 and 15. And I get the same results. So some people say, see, I got the same thing. What's the difference? The difference is that this code is slightly easier, to understand, right? And then, hold on. This code is slightly easier to understand. What did I just do? Oh, I have a print line in there. I copied and pasted. Okay. When you're trying to do manipulations on numbers or things, it's better to do it externally and then in your print line just use that variable instead of doing calculations in the print line. Again, this is an opinion of mine. I would rather see these 3 lines of code than this line of code, right? So again, when you need to do calculations or things like that, try to do it in variables and then in the print line just use the variables. Okay, so now we've learned how to read in a string and how to read in an integer. The same works for a double. Let's say I had a double x and I wanted to read it in. I would use, x equals in dot next double. Okay, so there are various ones you can use. Most likely for your beginning programming, you're going to use next line to read in strings, you're going to use next int to read in integers, and you're either going to use next double or next float to read in floating point numbers. Just remember that this in is not special. It's only because I called my variable up here in. I could call my scanner variable anything. I could call it input from console, and then every time I would have to say input from console.nextIn, input from console.nextIn. So I like to use in only because it's nice and short, right? Other people you'll see will use, console input, right? And then they'll have to say console input.nextIn. Whatever you name this variable is going to allow you to use the methods inside of the scanner class. Again, the methods you're going to use originally are next line, next int, and possibly next double or next float.